Metallica, here they come, the kings of metal.
So fucking what?
Hey everyone, this is Tom Quee here from Alpha Metallica, and you're listening to Metal Up Your Podcast.
Welcome to Metal Up Your Podcast. I'm Ethan Luck.
And I'm Clint Wells.
This is episode 134, and it's been a while, but we're going to jump into a top 10 on this episode. Oh, hang on a second, everybody.
This is us from the future, by the way.
Welcome to the future.
It's nice up here.
It's not too bad, yeah.
It's okay. It's a little saucy, but it's fine.
Trump is in his 7th term.
We're in the Trump dynasty. Listen, here's what happened, folks. So we'd planned on doing our top 10 riffs episode.
Right.
We had it all planned out. We put the clips in and everything. But what happened is we started talking about this James Hetfield deep dive into the Justice record, and that was such an interesting episode, and it took up so much time that we decided to make that the episode. So you're going to have to ignore any allusions
any
to
top 10 references. Just ignore.
We're not going to do that episode.
It'll happen. We're going to do it in the future here. Maybe it'll be our next episode once we come back in town.
And we kind of bypassed the housekeeping because this episode just got so dense. It's late here on a Sunday night. I did want to say thank you to Drew Perinaut and Dan Stewart for being new patrons.
Thank you.
We want to thank them. Yes. But we're going to bypass the normal housekeeping and just launch us right into the episode.
Yeah, I think we can agree that what intended on being like this shorter segment about this Hetfield interview turned into something that we didn't expect. Mm-hmm. I mean, we intended on doing the top 10 and having this thing be like maybe a 30-minute segment. And it turned out to be an hour and a half of us talking about this interview. So we're very happy with it, and it turned out great.
Yeah. So anyways, hang in there with us and ignore any continuity issues.
What are you talking about?
And we'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye. We're getting geared up for our vacations coming up. And
Konnichiwa, by the way.
Thank you. Arigato. And you got a new gig drum taking for Brandy Carlisle.
Yeah.
Which congrats. That's
Thanks.
awesome.
Yeah. I've talked about this a bunch, but Nashville sometimes is a tough town to find a playing gig. Mm-hmm. And I've been trying. You've been there. A lot of us have been there, but yeah, I know that Need to Breathe is picking up again next year when they do a new record and stuff. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just go out and try to get a teching gig again. And a friend of mine is the production manager for Brandy Carlisle. If you haven't heard her, by the way, her music's incredible, and I just got to see her perform for the first time yesterday at this festival while I was teching, and my God, it's a great show. So I'll be out with her all fall, pretty much, other than when I'm on vacation.
Yeah, I've just through my various tourings have crossed paths with her camp and done festivals and shows with Brandy and hung out with them. Matthew Mayfield and I did the Rock Boat one year, and she was headlining it with Need to Breathe. Actually,
oh, very cool. I'll be doing the Rock Boat in January.
Yeah, those are fun.
My first ever cruise. I've never been on one.
Well, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, hopefully Callie can come.
We didn't go to bed until 8 a.m. almost every day.
Oh, my.
It was pretty wild. If you're joining us for the first time, we're an All Metallica podcast, of course. Ethan and
We're not a Brandy Carlisle podcast?
Not yet.
Okay.
Ethan and I, we carve out time out of our busy touring schedules to talk about our favorite metal band, Metallica. I was thinking about it today. I love Metallica as much as I've ever loved them.
I know. It's crazy.
Even rolling into 3 years of this podcast.
Right.
I don't necessarily feel burnt out. I love watching all the So What interviews today and doing all the research for this episode.
Yeah.
Thinking about what my top 10 favorite riffs are, which, by the way, I think I have some surprises.
I think I've got a couple.
How did you go about whittling down your list? Did you appeal to what's been your favorite, kind of your whole fandom, or are you honing in on stuff that you're excited about now?
Kind of both. My course of action was this. I opened up iTunes, got all my Metallica records in there, and I just kind of went into it. It was literally right after we were texting about what to do the episode on. I'm like, I'm going to come in with a fresh head real quick, and I just started going record by record and just like typing out my favorite riffs from each record and then whittling it down from there. And some of them were hard to cut. I will say this as a little hint. There's one record that no riffs made it.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a couple. But,
Yeah, me too.
But one that may surprise you.
Me too. I
So.
bet it's the same one.
Probably Lulu.
Well, it's tempting too when we do these top 10 lists. Like we've done a lot of top 10s, our top 10 deep cuts, our top
Covers.
10 favorite songs, our top 10 covers, our top 10 solos or whatever. It's tempting. The hard thing, and I think as our listeners start to think about what theirs might be, which by the way, metalupyourpodcastshow at gmail.com, send us your top 10s also.
Yeah.
After we burn this episode down, because I'm interested in what people have to say.
I mean, this could span such a large spectrum because, I mean, you take one song off of Master of Puppets, and there's 10 great riffs just in one song.
Right.
So it's a tough thing to whittle down, I think.
But the tension there is like your favorite versus the best.
Exactly.
Because first of all, I'll go ahead and do this spoiler. Enter Sandman's not on my list.
Right.
And that's probably the greatest Metallica riff.
Yeah.
In terms of how far it's reached, what it did for the band, how recognizable it is. We do Enter Sandman in the country show that I do.
And people go nuts probably.
And the guy I play for has a lot of big hits. And the Enter Sandman moment is
Right.
almost the biggest moment of the show.
I feel like you could play in almost any genre of music, and if you started playing that, even just the opening, dun, 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 immediately most of the crowd would know it.
It's almost like when Carl Sagan they sent a record out into space,
Yeah.
to try to see if it ever interfaces with any extraterrestrial life.
Right.
What do we want to send them? And they sent Mozart or something, or they're beaming Mozart into space.
Did you send the Black Album?
Or like Richard Dawkins talks about how what's the one thing that you could communicate with other life, and his opinion is Darwinian evolution, because any other life in the universe will have come to fruition by the same Darwinian evolution.
Right.
And I feel like Enter Sandman riff is like that's what we could talk to aliens
It's
about.
part of our evolution
You know what I mean?
as beings.
And yet it didn't make my list.
They're like, we are here to kill you. 1 second, for a second. Can I hit play on this record real quick?
take me to the producer of the Black Album.
We are going to kill you right now with our zappers.
Zappers.
And then you put the needle down the
Right.
record. Dun, 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 and all of a sudden the aliens start moshing.
We want peace.
Yeah. We were just kidding. We'll put our zappers away.
Say your prayers, little ones.
Oh, wait, do we need to write an alien jingle now?
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so before we get into that, which I can't wait, as usual when we do these lists, Ethan and I do not know what our top 10s are.
Correct.
So we're going to all just find this out together. I'm sure it's going to inspire a lot of fun Metallica conversation. We've got a couple of news bits to hit.
Little tidbits.
Now, for those of us who may not be going to the S&M 2 gigs on September 6th and September 8th, the good news is they are going to be showing it for one night only in over 3,000 movie theaters on October 9th. Is that correct here? Yeah, October 9th. So you can go to Metallica.com and get tickets for that. 3,000 theaters is a lot. That's a
few.
It's a wide release. So the chances are some theater near you will be showing it. And so
Right.
a great night for you to either get connected with a local chapter, which I'm sure all of our friends in all these local chapters are going to be organizing a Metallica night.
Right.
Get involved, go see it, go take a buddy, take your spouse, take your kids. I know you and I will probably be
I'm going
going
to try. I
with Paul.
actually need to look at my schedule. I didn't even think about
It's
that.
on a Wednesday.
Yeah. Well, we do have some midweek shows, so we'll see.
So-
I hope I can go to these.
So that's the first thing. So anyway, put bookmark that and don't delay on that. Get that locked in. It's going to be a fun night. The next thing is going on. Have you seen this? The ABCs of Metallica. The
kids' book?
They're putting out a book.
Yeah.
It comes out November 26th. All the proceeds of the book going to the All Within My Hands Foundation, which is awesome.
Amazing.
To quote-unquote continue Metallica's support of workforce education and the fight against hunger.
I think this is awesome. I'm sure they'll get a lot of flack for it from maybe some old school fans. They're like, "Ugh, sell out. You're doing fucking children's book, blah, blah, blah." I think it's great. They're all parents. They all have kids, maybe not as young that would read this book anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's rad. I think it's awesome. I was just telling you briefly before we started this that Josh, who plays keys in Need to Breathe, he does it's kids music, but he calls it like family music. Like it's for the whole family kind of thing. But very similar in that, and like you don't often expect certain artists to be dabbling in that genre. There's stuff like Yo Gabba Gabba and whatever that kids are into and stuff. But it's pretty cool that Metallica is dipping their foot in that water.
Well, yeah, and I see it as just a continuation of them doing whatever they want to do.
You're going to buy that book for your daughter, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though she knows her ABCs already?
Well, of course I am, because it's
I'm going to buy that
fun.
for myself.
You're going to buy it for the daughter inside of you. wherever she is.
The child, yeah, her name is Ingrid. And,
Ingrid.
And that's the first name that came to my mind.
Wow.
If you have any listeners named Ingrid, this
Your
one's
alter
for you.
ego. Well, so anyway, all right, so put that on your radars too. And here's a little description of the book that was from Metallica.com. Including rhymes and illustrations, the ABCs of Metallica looks back at the history of the band from A to Z. Each letter of the alphabet highlights a moment along our journey from garage days to Master of Puppets to fun facts about the band. The book's co-authored by Howie Abrams, who did the Merciless Book of Metal Lists Hip Hop Alphabet, and with illustrations by Michael Caves McLear, who participated in Metallica's Obey Your Master exhibit in 2012. So it's like when they make whiskey or when they make beer, you know, they partner with some of the best, and I think it's going to be up to the normal standards we've come to love and enjoy from our favorite band.
Right. I feel like at this point they've dabbled in so many cool things. They just need to open up like stores in like around the country, like in malls or something. Like we can go there and get their records on vinyl, CD, cassette, whatever. You can get the van shoes. You can get the skateboard deck, the whiskey, the children's book,
the watches.
The watches, yeah. Metallica Outfitters.
Is that what it would be called?
Coming summer 2021.
Metallica Inc. Well, anyway, yeah, I mean, it's cool. If people think that's
cool.
sellout stuff, I just point you to the fact that it's all being donated to charity. So
I feel like at this point
you can go fuck yourself.
I feel like in 2019, if you're still one of those people going like they sold out, it's tired.
I know.
It's tired.
Grow up. Get out of here.
Well, and if you're one of those people that think that and you didn't get off the ride during the Black Album or Load and Reload, you're clearly still around and paying attention. So I don't know what to tell you anymore.
Yeah.
Just enjoy the ride or
I've prepared a statement for them.
What is it?
Eat my shorts.
Eat my shorts.
Now, the next bit of news, and we're going to kind of hover in this for a second because I found this very, very interesting.
Pleases, Clint.
So Steffan Chirazi, who, does the So What stuff. He does a lot of stuff for the band.
Right.
He edits the So What magazine. He conducts a lot of roundtable type interviews. He catches up with the band. And you know what's cool about him is he asks a lot of questions that like you and I would ask the boys should they ever come on the show.
Right. Not just normal like interview questions like, so what happened with Cliff?
And I think also because he's close with them. I mean, he's been a part of the Metallica camp since the Carlson days.
Yeah.
He's been around almost since the very beginning.
That's amazing.
And because of that closeness, he asks questions that really get inside, and then he pushes back on them.
Yeah.
He's always really respectful, of course.
Sure.
But you can tell they share a camaraderie that I think makes these kinds of interviews more interesting than a typical journalist.
Right, yeah. Well, and like you said, with that history that he has with the band, it makes it a lot, easier and maybe more comfortable for him to kind of push a little bit. He knows what buttons not to push with James or whoever.
Sure.
So he feels comfortable to dig a little deeper than maybe your average journalist from whatever magazine.
And they're
would do.
comfortable with him.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of trust and respect that goes both ways.
Yeah.
So when he does push a little bit, I think he's getting good shit out of them.
Yep.
And again, I think this is just an extension of what they're willing to, the kind of content they're willing to offer their fans. It's a very transparent vibe.
Right.
So I guess what happened, I didn't really read this whole thing, but I guess what happened is because they've been busy touring and stuff, they kind of have a backlog of So What type behind the scenes stuff. So it's like Rob talking about basses. It's the whole band talking about the Chris Cornell stuff, which is really interesting. Like why they chose Head Injury, what it was like at the Forum gig, James being nervous about it, what they thought of the other artists who played, what they think about Chris's career. Mm-hmm. That's a 10-minute clip that's like gold for me.
Yeah, I haven't watched that one yet.
Which, by the way, we just did an Instagram Live, which was really fun. But me and you and Paul Moak, Monday night, so as this episode is dropping,
tonight,
are doing a grunge night
at the Basement East.
In
East Nashville, yeah.
Where I guess there's an Alice in Chains tribute band headlining it.
They're kind of organizing the whole thing.
But what they did is they tapped a bunch of local Nashville musicians. Many of us and all of us, I think, professional musicians.
Yeah.
And we each got assigned a 90s grunge song.
Yeah, we were a little fortunate. I think I was one of the early people he hit up, and I immediately was like, is Soundgarden on there? Or Alice in Chains? We talked about both. And I can't remember what Alice in Chains song it was, but it got taken or something. So I was like, we'll do Burden in My Hand.
So that's what we're doing. So it's been a like Overfloater on the EP and like Kickstand that you did on Cover Our World Blackened 3, dissecting and trying to recreate Soundgarden songs in a way that isn't shitty is super challenging. So Ethan's playing bass, Paul Moak and I are playing guitar, and then the lead singer of the Alice in Chains tribute band is going to sing, and then who's the guy playing drums?
My buddy Aaron Tosti. He's old. I've known him. He's from California. We've been friends since I've known him since he was probably 9 years old.
And I'm in the biggest Soundgarden phase of my entire life, and I've obviously loved that band since Super Unknown came out, or even Bad Motorfinger, because Outshined was a big radio hit in the South. And so anyway, we're going to get video of that for sure. And
I want to make sure someone... you know what? Actually, this is perfect timing. Slight tangent, but it relates to tomorrow night.
Okay.
I was just gifted a GoPro camera.
By whom?
My niece.
Oh.
She's 13.
Wow. What a sweet gift.
My sister got it for her like 2 years ago or something, and she basically used it for like a week, and then my sister found it in the garage, like boxed back up. She's like, would you use this? I was like, 100% I would use this.
Okay.
So I could bring that tomorrow night, mount it somewhere, and we can get some footage of it.
Awesome. I can't wait.
All right.
I'm a little nervous about it, but...
Now, if we don't post the footage, you know that it didn't go well.
Yeah, that's true. We'll just choose to remember it in our minds, and it was great in our minds.
Or we'll find that the 30-second clip that sounds good and be like, oh, the camera shut off.
Crap.
Weird. Yeah, it's an older GoPro, so the battery died early.
So that's happening. Anyway, it was nice to see the boys talking about Chris Cornell.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And this is, so like I was saying, this is kind of backlog stuff. This is like content they've been getting in dressing rooms and behind the scenes on the various arena tours over the last year or so.
Right.
So where we're going to camp out now is there's a really in-depth interview with James about And Justice for All.
It's really cool.
That I'm guessing they were compiling around the time of the release of the box set, which was around January.
Right.
And, we did 5 or 6 episodes on the box set. We've given away 2 box sets.
Right.
Of the Justice reissue stuff. So, we tackle... here are the things that get tackled in this interview. The bass being present, the hazing of Jason, working with Mike Klink.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The aftermath of making a video, the one video.
Right.
James's favorite songs from the record.
The overall theme of Justice for All.
Exactly. The political nature of the record. And so just, I feel very grateful to Steffan for mining the depths of some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Because again, this is stuff that we would be asking James.
Yep.
So now I'm going to talk through the interview a little bit. I'm not going to read the whole thing, obviously. And then we have video clips too. You can find all this on Metallica.com, but you have to be a 5th member, which is free.
That sounds expensive.
So just sign up for it, and then you log in and you get access to this So What stuff. So this is kind of setting it up, saying that James Hetfield's in good spirits backstage at the Ericsson Globe in Stockholm, Sweden. So this is with the Sweden show.
Okay.
Let's see. The stage was set for an excellent look back at quite possibly the most vital album of Metallica's career. To gauge that sentiment, you'd need to remember what the band had been through in their short yet rapid rise career. Phase 1 of Metallica closing with the horrific tragedy of Cliff Burton's death, and Phase 2 not yet fully determined, which is why looking back, And Justice for All was so utterly vital, its life, resonance, and quote-unquote new lineup, meaning Jason Newkid,
Right.
Proving that Metallica was going to smash its way larger than life through all obstacles as opposed to drifting quietly into the background, which I guess could have happened.
It could have. I mean...
The death of Cliff could have really derailed their momentum from the Puppets tour with Ozzy playing arenas. Then they need to start doing their own arena tours.
Right.
If they would have taken a year off...
Well, we know at one point they were even questioning continuing as a band.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a chance at one point where Metallica would have been done after Puppets.
So the first clip, this is kind of how Steffan starts off, and he's the interviewer here. He asked James, how do you view the Justice era in retrospect now as you sit and look at it? So we're going to hear a clip where James is talking about sort of where the band was at with Cliff's passing, with Jason coming in, how Jason's fit in the beginning. So let's hear that clip.
All right.
Well, Justice was an unsure new beginning, is what it felt like to me. We had done the covers album, so we understood that Jason could play and would fit in with the band, and then, a first studio album. That's when, I don't want to say really missing Cliff, but I got a little scared at that point. Having Jason on board, I guess we were a little more focused on him than a whole band thing, It was like we kind of got individualized at some point. and it kind of sounds like that on the record. There's a little more showmanship. There's a little more of me in the mix, kind of thing. And I don't know if the bass being down was a little subliminal kind of, hey, welcome, motherfucker. You got to fight for your fader to go up.
And you're right to party.
We were still mourning, I would say. I was still sad that Cliff was gone, but excited that Jason was there. He's able to sing, he's playing, with a pick, he's fast, he's right there with the guitar. We really wanted to beat that little fanboy out of him. We did not like the fact that there was a fanboy in there, I think we were scared a little bit that, oh shit, like you married a fan or something,
Now that's I've never heard him say things like this, so
it's interesting. I mean, I almost feel like the older James gets, the more maybe the veil is lifted off of a lot of these maybe secrets, or not secrets, but just things that everyone's assumed and they haven't really addressed specifically. Because I mean, even him just talking about like, we basically hired a fan.
Well, he even says that they edited this out of the audio we just heard, but the transcription actually contains him referencing Rob, and he says, we heard him say we really wanted to beat the fanboy out of him.
Right.
We didn't like the fact there was a fanboy in there, and he said, he said they'd be doing interviews, and Jason's whole vibe was like, "Oh, it's such a dream." They didn't like that.
Yeah.
And he says, I didn't hear any of that from Rob when he first joined. Rob was like, "This is great. I'm looking forward to kicking some ass," and that's that. So, on one hand, Jason being such a fan is part of what was the synergy of him being in the band was that, and I think what we all resonated with was we felt like one of us was in the band.
Right.
And that opened it up in this whole different way. But I could see how for these little punk rock thrash metal kids that were making this shit, that they were like, we don't want a fucking fan in here. We want someone who's almost a little indifferent to what we've accomplished.
Right. I get it on the inside. That's how they would feel. But in retrospect, that fanboy in Jason is why we got one of the most amazing performers in that band. And he was almost like the hype guy. He got the crowd going. He had great backup vocals, great stage presence. Like his excitement as a fan of the band joining Metallica is why we got the Jason that we did for 13 years.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like, I can't really tell the. It's almost like James is he's obviously complimenting him. He's like, it was great. He could play fast. He played with a pick. He was right there with the guitar. But there's also a small tinge of him still kind of jabbing him
a little bit. I mean, I think in a way James is conducting this interview, especially this question or this subject, in retrospect. This is how we were feeling and thinking at that time.
Yeah.
I think if a follow-up question was, do you still feel that way about that era? He might be like, no, I mean, that's just where we were in life. I mean, especially with how much he kind of talks about and mentions, we were still, mourning Cliff's loss.
Right.
So I would like to believe, and I don't think that he thinks that way anymore. I think he's talking about that time period and where they were in their headspace.
And in typical James fashion, I mean, he's being honest and he's being frank and direct, and that's what I want from him anyway.
And I don't think Jason would actually disagree with any of that.
Yeah, I think that's true too. Steffan follows up and he basically says like, well, I'm paraphrasing, but you could all kind of read this yourself at Metallica.com, but Steffan's basically like, didn't that start to change? Didn't he start to evolve out of that new kid living the dream thing into more of a peer? And James says, he says he was contributing, which definitely helped take that fanboy just standing there away. He says, and that did go away, and there was obviously a major hazing period that continued. He says, I think he tried to outgrow that, taking more control of certain things, and then it showed up as maybe a little threatening to Lars and I. He says, Lars and I have been steering the ship for a long time, and now someone else is wanting to have some wheel time. He says, so it was all very new for us. Cliff was a certain personality, very strong, did things his way, but was always reliable and loyal, extremely loyal. And Jason came in with a different attitude. It was bouncy. He reminded me of a basketball. I don't know why, but he was always moving, always.
Yeah.
And I think what's surprising on my journey learning more about Metallica by doing the podcast, one of the things that surprised me was to hear how, in certain aspects that I did not expect, Cliff was pretty hands-off. He would go through his parts in the studio, and then he famously, because he didn't enjoy being in Copenhagen,
he would take off.
He would leave, and then
he would come late.
He wouldn't show up to the fucking curb, what we call a curb call, which is when you show up to the airport.
Right, he would miss his flight.
He's like, "Well, you guys are just going to get there and argue for the first whatever, and get sounds.
Right,
I'll come in later." And then I've heard, when we were exploring the Justice box set and diving into interviews with James about Cliff, it's like not Justice, but the puppet stuff.
Right, yeah.
He's like, he would show up like kind of unrehearsed.
Yeah, I mean, but that's kind of what his life was. It was very, almost like a hippie mentality.
Right.
Just like, let's just go with the flow, man. Like,
but I think that, and it's well documented on this podcast and in all the literature, that James really looked up to Cliff.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
and I just think they just really respected him. And
they weren't going to argue with him about him being late or him missing his flight. There
wasn't going to be a band meeting like, Cliff, we need to talk to you.
Right, but when Jason shows up, it's like, okay, like you said, we've been steering this ship for a while.
Right,
you're going to come in, and. Thankfully, Jason, I think it's a plus side that he was this kind of fanboy that was like a basketball and always bouncing around and stuff. Because they probably never had to worry about him as far as being late or whatever. He was probably the first one to bus call, first one to the airport. He was always probably just like, I'm here, ready to go.
But I think in a way that eagerness rubbed them wrong because it was so antithetical to the way Cliff was. Because Cliff just had such a confident self-assuredness that I think James looked to. Yeah. And I think when the tables flipped on that, there was something kind of a turnoff about it. Mm-hmm. It's like in relationships, like if I don't know if you and I haven't been in the courting dating game in so goddamn long, but
true.
I remember if you wanted to be with someone so badly, and if they showed you too much attention in that whole game, it was almost a turnoff.
Right.
It was almost like wanting this thing that you thought you couldn't have or something.
Yeah.
And then if someone seemed too eager, you were kind of like, it pushed you away a little bit.
Yeah. Do girls still like to go to TGI Fridays for the first date?
I think they do.
And pretend it's your birthday and get a free dessert?
I think they love to play skee ball.
Perfect.
And then if you accumulate enough tickets at Showbiz or at Chuck E. Cheese.
There's a time in my life where I'm single again, God forbid. I'm doing that.
Steffan goes in to ask, and he says, at the time, did Jason contribute any ideas, musically, creatively, that you now look back and think that was actually a pretty good riff, but we weren't going to let you have it? And James says no. He said, if there's good stuff, we're going to use it. He said, we don't care. And Steffan says, could you hear his good stuff? Do you think you were objective enough to be able to hear his good material? Or was it just like, no, this is us, you're still learning? James says, I was probably as objective as I could have been, probably less than I am now. Not even probably, absolutely less than I am now. He says, now hearing something from anybody that's good, let's use it, let's go. He says, we've always had that attitude, but, I can't tell you exactly where my head was right there. I think that's proven. I think James is vindicated by the fact that Blackened made the record.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was Jason's first record. And
it's the title track, and it's definitely one of the best Metallica songs ever.
The title track.
The title track. Did I say that? Yeah. Did I say title track?
Yeah, but I was just thinking, like, it might be pretty. That would be a bitchin' album title. Follow up to Master Puppets.
Are you telling me that the record's not called Blackened after all this time? That's what I thought.
I can go grab my copy on vinyl and double check, but I'm pretty sure it's not called Blackened. But that would be a great album title.
All right. Well, so moving on. Steffan starts asking James about the political nature of the record. Mm-hmm. Short of Straw being about being blacklisted and McCarthyism and the communism scare. Of course, the song "Injustice for All." Mm-hmm. "I Have the Beholder," "We have the freedom to choose and your own choice."
Right.
All this stuff. So this next clip is him speaking specifically about "Harvester of Sorrow" and "Short of Straw," and then the bigger themes of the record.
Right. Yeah.
So let's hear that.
All right.
Yeah, "Short of Straw," "Harvester of Sorrow," two songs that everyone who has had in any way an insecure or an anxious or a fearful thought will relate to those songs forever. I mean, were you surprised to find yourself writing that stuff? Did it resonate with you in that way? I mean, bring us through the process that got those out of you.
Yeah, "Short of Straw" for sure. To me, that's more political than any of the other songs, really. I mean, it talks about a time, McCarthyism, and the artists not being able to be free, but also communism is a problem, all of that kind of bunched up into one. And it seems like every generation has that happening, whether it's PC-ness versus, there's an artist that says this, and that's not PC. Well, so what? He's an artist, or free speech. And Justice for All, again, a continuation or more of a ramp up into putting ourselves into situations or somehow relating to them, even though they might be historical or from the past, still plugging into the feelings that are human. Yeah, infanticide. That was a cool word to me, so I kind of built a song around it. Infanticide? What the hell is that? The killing of an infant. Whoa, that's brutal. Yeah, being trapped. It kind of seems like that's a theme. Always.
Yeah. I mean, kind of the overall theme of the record, even getting past the political side of it, was just freedom of choice. And, Eye of the Beholder, for Straw, Dyer's Eve, all of that just kind of had that thread.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, at that point we had discovered that, wow, there's two sides to every coin, and let's investigate both sides. It was not choosing any sides, and, being able to see that there are two sides, so the lyrics back then were pretty much, here's my view. I start writing, or I hear or see something, and something in me, especially back then, identifies with it. I don't know how or why. I had no inventory of my feelings, my past actions, my damage. None of that was on the radar. So it was just connecting because I felt something.
So I find that very fascinating.
Very much so, yeah.
Especially because, I've been thinking a lot about this. I think where we really begin to see James exploring his own shit is with Dyer's Eve.
Yeah.
Dear Mother, Dear Father Earth. Because it'll always be that for me. I can't help it.
Will, yes.
When
Dyer's Eve, whenever I listen to Justice and that song comes on, that's what I hear.
And we all know, or maybe you don't know out there, faithful Metal Up Your Podcast family, but Dyer's Eve is a huge indictment on James's religious upbringing and his resentment towards his parents for, shielding him from higher truths.
Right. Yeah.
To borrow a Chris Cornell phrase. Before that, it's Master of Puppets, about an indictment on someone else who's a drug addict, or it's Sanitarium, a story about a guy in an insane asylum. Blackened, about the environment. Sort of Straw, about McCarthyism.
Right. This is very much a political record. It's a very introspective record. I feel like,
but Dyer's Eve is where I think it's personal.
Yes, exactly.
There's nothing really. One is about a war guy.
Sure.
Afraid into Sanity is kind of another insane asylum guy.
Right, but when he's talking about stuff about somebody saying something and it's offensive, but who cares? He's an artist.
Yes,
that's his art.
Yeah.
I think that's also James himself,
right?
Writing lyrics like this that maybe at the time and maybe even now might be not necessarily controversial, but kind of like, whoa, I can't believe you're singing about that. Well, so what? I'm the artist. Like this is how I feel. This is what I want to sing about. And I like that he came to a place in his life on this record and writing these songs that he's comfortable with that, and that he can put it out on record and not be embarrassed by it or anything like that,
But it's just so fascinating because that is a question I would ask him. If when you were writing this record, where we're really starting to see a more personal thing, that's not, we're going to wear leather and kick ass tonight.
Right. Which is always a good thing.
Because even think about, I guess Fade to Black would be the closest personal thing because their gear got stolen and he was suicidal. But Fight Fire with Fire is another sort of, nuclear Holocaust tune. Ride the Lightning is a comment on capital punishment.
Half the songs on Kill 'Em All are just about the metal scene.
Right.
And,
Creeping
Metal
Death
Militia.
is about the Book of Exodus.
Right.
The Four Horsemen is another kind of apocalyptic, biblical type vibe.
Right, yeah.
Metal Militia, we're going to march in. And so you're exploring, why were you getting more personal? And his answer being, I don't know how or why. I had no inventory of my feelings. my past actions, my traumas, my damage, none of that was on the radar. I was just connecting because I felt something. That's interesting to me.
I mean,
I appreciate the honesty of it too. He's like, well,
yeah, absolutely.
He was just in the fire writing, and it wasn't this whole like, I feel this way, I want to exercise this feeling, I want to write a personal song about my parents. That's just what came out.
Well, and you know, I think you and I can both relate as songwriters that there's times where you're maybe going, you know, forth with something, a song idea, and here's the content, here's what I want to write about that thinks to be a cool subject, and maybe you write some line that all of a sudden triggers something that, you know, you didn't intend on writing about. You know, maybe Dyer's Eve originally he was writing about something completely different, but something sparked inside of him where I was like, wow, like that line actually can relate to something that happened in my past, and like that would be a good thing to write about. I've been there where I started writing a song, and literally halfway through I'm like, this is just taking on a whole new meaning. I'm like, wait a second, and then that all of a sudden alters the next verse, or I redo the first verse, redo the whole song, and then it's a whole new beast than what I intended it to be.
I remember reading a Jeff Tweedy interview. Are you a Wilco guy at all?
I'm not huge, but I think they're a great band.
Okay, I'm a massive Wilco fan. And they have a record called A Ghost is Born, which they won a couple of Grammys for, 2001.
Okay.
Actually, forgive me, that was Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. This is like 2004. In fact, I know it's 2004.
Okay.
And
Rob Thomas is the singer, right?
Yeah. And what we came to learn about that year, the year that they was writing that record, A Ghost is Born, is that, so Jay Bennett, who was the guitar player in Wilco, died of a drug-related death.
Okay.
So the band went down to a 4-piece, and A Ghost is Born is a very dark record. Jeff played all the lead guitar on it. It's really funky, crazy lead guitar playing, because he's not really a guitar player.
Yeah.
And it's probably their greatest work, almost, in some ways, because it's so otherworldly. It's very Beatles, but also very like Dinosaur Jr.
I already want to listen to it.
Oh, it's almost painful to listen to because it's kind of an art record.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely stunningly beautiful, lyrically amazing. So after they toured that record, he checked himself into rehab for pill and alcohol
Jeff
addiction.
Tweedy?
Yeah, Jeff Tweedy.
Okay.
Where it's like came out that he was like really, really fucked up.
Yeah.
Depressed, on drugs. And he talks about how he's often praised for the lyrical insight and depth of that record. Mm-hmm. And he said that when he got clean, he would go tour. He was still playing those songs live. And he's like, I had no idea what those songs meant when I was writing them because he was in this crazy fog.
Right. And
he's like, now that I'm, clean and sober and present, and I'm singing these lyrics every night to audiences, but I'm also it was almost like a letter to myself. Mm-hmm. And he was teasing out themes that he didn't even know were there.
Wow.
And I feel like that's kind of what James is describing a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see that, from a songwriting perspective. You might be in a weird headspace writing a song, like Jeff Tweedy might be, on drugs or depressed or whatever. I mean, I've definitely written stuff when I've been depressed or anxious or whatever. And, the difference for me is I know what I'm writing, but looking back on certain things, I'm like, wow, like why did I use that line or whatever? Mm-hmm. It's a cool, it's one of those beauties of being an artist and creating something is oftentimes you have to be in some kind of interesting space mentally or even physically or whatever for something to come out, Mm-hmm. There's times where, I love my HQ1. I love my studio. It's fun. It's a good vibe, but there's times where I just get stuck down here, and I might just go sit in my backyard, or when I go on the road, I take a guitar with me and I sit in a different area or I'm in a different headspace, and all of a sudden something different comes out. So maybe something like that. I'm not saying everyone needs to like get hooked on drugs and pills to write great songs, but
I am saying that.
In that case, Clint's saying that. I don't endorse it, but but it's one of those things that it sucks that he was doing drugs and all that stuff, but man, coming out on the other side of it, on the positive end, ended up writing a great record.
Yeah.
And maybe with James, with Justice for All, he tapped into some very personal stuff, and he had to be in that headspace at the time of his life to write that stuff. I don't know if James in 2019 could write, maybe he could still write a Dyer's Eve, but maybe not like Eye of the Beholder.
Well, yeah, and we also have the benefit of hindsight, and you end up sort of re-engineering meaning and purpose from from where we sit now, which is real easy to do.
Right, yeah.
You know how that is. It's like real easy to explain something you did now. You're like, oh, well, maybe I was going through this and that. When you're doing it, you're just in the fire.
You're just doing it. Yeah, exactly.
And it'd be really difficult to like describe why you feel the way you feel or why it's coming through you in a certain lyrical concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, moving into the sound of Justice and the mixing, because as we all remember, if we've all been doing our homework, they mixed this record while on the Monsters of Rock tour. So they're playing the Monsters of Rock tour, and then that show would end. Jason and Kirk are going to get back on the bus and, who knows, do whatever they were doing. Lars and James were going to Bearsville in upstate New York and mixing the record.
Right.
And they were doing that for the whole tour. Okay, so I think that's an important key to some of the fidelity issues of Justice.
Sure.
Because the lack of bass is just this huge mystery. I think in this interview, we're learning more than we ever have.
Yeah.
So he's asked, talk about the mixing on the Monsters of Rock tour, is what James has to say. He says, it was easy in the beginning because we were on the East Coast and closer to Bearsville. He says, and then as we got further away, we weren't taking the charter plane at that point. We were in a limo. I remember the drive from Bearsville to Washington, D.C. for a gig. It was long. Lars and I were sleeping in the back of a car after being up mixing. He says it was very taxing getting up, doing a show. He says doing a show was the easy part because we felt energy, but going and mixing the record was the harder part. Being in there mixing stuff, he says there were times that it felt like going to war, mixing with Lars Ulrich. He says, and James Hetfield, he takes some responsibility for it too. He says, I'd leave for a little bit, all of a sudden I'd come back and the drums are louder. You know, like they were just having that battle. Turn the guitars up, turn the drums up, the ego, you know. And he talks about how they learned later that like if they would just have a talk about it, they could avoid all this fighting. But I guess back then, it's 1988. They're ascending at an insane level. They're young. They're mourning Cliff.
Right.
They got the new guy in the band. They're just dealing with a bunch of shit.
Well, it's also, I mean, when you're in the middle of a tour and trying to mix a record, it's not like it is now where you can just get files sent to you and listen to them over and over and over again. Back then, I mean, CDs were around, but it was a very new technology. I mean, maybe they had, you know, some kind of CD player on the road where they could listen to the mixes.
No, it was tapes. He even says this. He says he says basically they would come back from mix with a rough.
Okay, on cassette.
On a cassette. He says, and we'd put it on the bus and everyone would say, oh, it sounds like shit. And they're like, oh, great, thanks, dude. You go mix it, you know? And so Steffan asks, he's really pressing this point. He says, did you ever sit down with Jason at any point when he was in the band and say, you know, dude, we kind of did do a bit of a number on the bass on the record, and I'm sorry. This is what happened. This is why we felt we had to do it. He said, did you ever talk to him about it? And James simply says, no.
No.
He says, never. He never asked you once. He never came up to you and said, guys, this sounds less than I expected. And James says, I think this is interesting, he says, he probably did. I don't know what my answer was then, but it was kind of done. He says, I will say it was not all about fuck him, let's turn it down. That's for sure. We wanted the best sounding record we could make, which we've said this before.
Sure.
He says, that was our goal. We were burnt. We were fried. He says, going back and forth, playing a gig, no earphones, or no earplugs, no nothing. You go back to the studio, your hearing is shot. And he said, if your ears can't hear any high end anymore, you're going to turn it up. So we're turning the high end up more and more and more, and all of a sudden the low end's gone. He says, I know that played a bigger part than any hazing or any ill feelings towards Jason, for sure. We were fried. We were burnt.
This is not a lot of info that I actually knew until this interview.
Well, we talked about that. Like, we knew that they mixed it that way and that they were fatigued because they were also, this is Alcoholica. I mean, they were also partying.
Right, yeah. I mean, they're probably, you know, finishing a show, getting super hammered drunk, then hopping on the charter plane, going up to the, you know, to mix the record, showing up.
No sleep.
Hungover, no sleep.
Yeah.
Your ears are shot, ringing.
And let's talk about that just for briefly. Like, that's a real thing. We call it like losing your ears. Like, you know, I'm sure Paul deals with this all the time. I know I do when I'm mixing. Like, you just listen to it so much that you just got to take a break.
You have to, yeah.
Because you start to lose your objectivity because you get ear fatigue.
Yeah. Ear fatigue is a real thing. I mean, you listen to something, it doesn't even have to be at a loud volume. It's just something that's over and over and over and over again. Your ears are going to get tired. Your ears are going to start, and your brain are going to start playing tricks on you, and you might think it sounds good, but then you walk away from it, go to bed, come back the next morning, fire up your studio, listen to what you mixed the night before, and in your memory, you're like, oh, that sounded pretty rad before I went to bed last night.
And then you listen to it, and you're like, ugh.
You're like, wow, that's
horrible.
bad. Exactly.
Well, so now another guy that's sitting in on this interview is a guy named Dan. Dan is the guy who curates these box sets. So for whatever...
Thank you, Dan.
I mean, he's given deep vault access.
Yeah.
So he goes into Lars's crazy vault, and he's the one who curates these box sets. I mean, obviously, it gets final approval, but he's the one who... You know how they come with all these crazy live shows? Remember we listened to that one show where they're like super drunk?
Yeah.
He's the one who kind of finds all these and is like, this would be interesting to include.
Yeah.
And so he's there too, and he asks, or he mentions Steve Thompson, the guy that mixed it. Now, Steve Thompson has kind of come out recently and been like, I'm embarrassed by the sound of Injustice for All. I wanted to quit. Remember, we've talked about this.
Yeah, no, there's a clip online of him talking about it.
So he says, he brings this up to James. He says, in recent years, Steve Thompson, who's the mixing engineer, has been talking about how, A, the record sounds shitty, and B, you can blame 100% of it on Lars, because he was the one who made me turn the bass down, and we tried to do all these other things, which he says, I find that to be unfair. He says that to James. James says, we wanted it tight. We wanted it fucking tight. He says, we wanted the snare, we wanted the guitar, we wanted everything up front in your face and really tight, and we thought we got it. He says, we kind of know what we want to sound like. He says, can we sit behind a desk and make it happen? No. We ask other people to do it, and they do it. He says, so Steve did his job. He's got nothing to apologize for or point fingers at. No one's to blame for quote-unquote something. It's a piece of art. It happened, and it ended up the way it is for a reason, and for reasons we were just talking about. We were burnt. We were traveling. We're playing a gig. Our ears are fried. We're not sleeping. He doesn't need to defend himself. He was part of an awesome album in history.
Wow.
And I think he should maybe be a little easier on himself.
Wow.
Ooh.
Nice turnaround, James.
I like your Owen Wilson. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. How's your portfolio?
No, that's a very 56-year-old James thing to say. And I mean, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that though too. I mean, he's right. I mean, even Jason himself has said, listen, sure, the bass could have been louder, but that's not the way the record was. That's not the way that it turned out. It's a piece of art, and it was recorded at a time, in period, and that's how it came out. So everyone be happy with that. You know, that was their intention. It wasn't like it was an accident.
Well, and he says this. He says all this bass discussion is after the fact. He says, why would you want to change history? Why would you all of a sudden put bass on it? He says there is bass on it, but why would you remix it? You can remaster it, yes, but why would you remix something and make it different? He says, I'm not comparing us to the Mona Lisa, but it'd be like, can you make her smile a little better? He's like, and I get it. He's like, why? It's just done. It's over.
Right. I mean, obviously a lot of us, huge Metallica fans would love at least just like a one-time stream only of listening to a remix version. I personally, I'm not going to be the guy for years and years. It's like, I wish it had bass on it, but I would one time just to like to go into a studio. They pull up the Justice raw reels and just pump that bass and listen through it one time.
Yeah.
Be like, all right, cool. I'm cool. Honestly, I feel like what my reaction would end up being is, oh, that was cool. I'll listen to the normal version because I've listened to that since the 80s.
Well, and like you can hear it on Seattle 89. You can hear all Jason's bass parts. So it's not like a huge mystery.
I just want to hear what he actually played and like how, you know what I mean? Like it's more or less just I love Jason so much and I love his bass playing.
Yeah.
I want to hear what he did specifically on these songs. But I'm not going to harp on that the rest of my life,
So moving out of that a little bit into the song One and the video. So he's asked, he says, did your management, meaning Q Prime, which I'm a big fan of Q Prime.
Yeah.
Especially as players in this big Metallica story. I think Q Prime has been a really impressive example of management that just really got it right.
Well, there's not a lot of management companies out there that have one artist they work with for as long as this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impressive how long they've been together.
Well, so he asked, did management ever say when putting Justice together, guys, it'd be really great if you could give us a song that maybe is 5.5 or 6 minutes long for like a single.
Right.
Because one would be a kind of unlikely breakout hit for them.
Yeah.
But I love the idea where he's like, did your management ever give you grief about that? And I love, James says, never. He says, no one's ever said that. He said, I'm the one saying it. Let's shorten up these fucking songs. He says, when we went on tour supporting Justice, that's when I discovered these songs are really long. He said, we're playing close to 2 hours and the set list is so short.
Well, Lars has said that in past. I think we've probably even inserted a clip at some point where they figured that out. Yeah, during the show, they're like, "Fuck these songs." It's.
I think it was Kirk. They would look out and see how like tired the crowd looked.
Right. A lot of it, I think, was referencing when they were going into the Black Album as to why they wrote such shorter songs too. Like, our fans are tired. These songs are 8 minutes long. Yeah.
Well, so now we're going to hear an interesting clip about the one video and about a disgruntled, quote unquote, true who was so upset with James that they made a video that he spit on him.
Love it.
So let's hear James talk about that.
As far as the one video, doing that video was a lot of fun. I remember I had on my guitar the Eat Fuck or whatever. I had something on my guitar. And it was the first time I felt like I had compromised when the producer said, you got to take that off your guitar. I was like, what the fuck? And it was something like that. There was something on my guitar and I was like, no way, no fucking way. And management was like, hey man, just do it, think, eat, fuck on inside, or whatever it was, It's like, all right. It's not worth fighting that. Getting a video out there and doing it, I think is going to be way, way, way better for people to absorb this, whether my guitar says something or not. When we went back to the Bay Area, I remember going to the Stone, which was on Broadway Street. Went to see some metal band, of course, back when there were a Stone and metal bands playing on Broadway. I remember this large man coming up to me and he's like, fuck you. And he spit on me. What the fuck? You sold out, man. You made a video. And right then, I knew we're going to have to deal with some of these people, or we're going to lose some fans because they don't get it. They don't get what we're doing. They don't get that we're taking it to the next level. We're taking it to the masses, and they're going to get a taste of Metallica. And he didn't like it. It was a sad moment, but we always tried just to be, the guys who live down the street and make noise in their garage, We always tried to be those guys and still continue to try to be that. And people's vision of you, that's when I realized people want you to be something for themselves. You represent something for them. And if it looks weird or something changes, it scares them. And they don't feel stable anymore. So they take it out on you.
And that was, was it upsetting to have people do that?
Mm-hmm.
Or
sure.
Did it fuel your anger even?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
More anger, more sort of like, fuck you, we're going to show you. That kind of thing.
He's the reason we made a lot of videos.
We got to find this guy. I want to know who this was.
Hardwired to Self-Destruct. I said, we got to do one for every song for that fucking guy at the Stone.
Okay, so there's some deep shit, I think, there. So first of all, it's interesting to see to hear a sort of like concrete example of how the pushback from the Trues was already happening in 88 and 89.
And that was just for one video.
And they actually, the transcript, they edited it out, but he says, right then I knew there's some fucking idiots in the world that we're going to have to deal with. They took that out.
Right.
Because that's pretty intense. But It's true. A guy who would come up to James Hetfield and spit on him for making a music video is a fucking idiot.
Yeah, that's pretty dumb.
Super dumb.
I can't justify what the guy did. I can understand maybe like as a true fan back then when, their fourth record came out. They'd never made a music video. They were this underground band. They were your band, and you live in San Francisco, and they live in San Francisco. It's like this connection. I can understand being frustrated, like, man, that sucks. Like, MTV's so popular, and then my favorite band who were underground and cool and whatever made a video. They sold out. But to walk up to the dude that did it and tell him that and tell him fuck you and spit on him,
you're a jerk.
That's an asshole move. Come on.
Well, I think James says some really deep shit here, honestly. He says, that's when I realized that people want you to be something for themselves.
Yes, I love this part.
You represent something for them, and if it looks weird or something changes, which I would insert the word evolves, then it scares them, and they don't feel stable anymore.
Right.
So they take it out on you. That is some deep shit. And that is exactly the diagnosis of the Trues who got whatever, whether it's Fade to Black or whether it's the slow part of Orion or whether it's they made a fucking video or they shortened their songs. You know, because we really have, in fact, we have justice to thank, in my opinion, in my research with this band, for what would the justice is so important to what would become the Black Album.
I agree, 100%.
Because that's where they really saw the limits of the long progressive thrash thing. They went to the edge of it,
and that's what that record is. I mean, that's when it's the most technical record, the longest songs, all this stuff.
Easily.
I think that was their last bit of gas on the thrash metal era.
Well, I just think they took it far, and James says that in the previous quote. He says. They don't get that we're taking it to the next level. And I'm kind of hearing foreshadows of Black Album. He says we're taking it to the masses.
Yeah.
They're going to get a taste of Metallica, and he didn't like that the masses were going to get a taste of Metallica.
Yeah, sure.
And that's petty and lame. It happened with the Beatles, too. The Beatles famously played like the Star Club in Germany and would do these 7-hour sets where they were wearing all leather. They were like Aerosmith in the 70s.
Right, yeah.
Before they were the mop top Fab Four in suits.
Right.
They were like a pill-popping rough band. John Lennon allegedly fucking kicked a guy to death. These were some crude motherfuckers.
Jeez, I didn't know that.
You got to read a book called The Lives of John Lennon by Albert Goldman.
Okay.
It's a big hit piece.
Okay.
It's intense. But they were like a band you didn't want to run into in an alley.
Yeah.
Then they blew up, and they're like, oh, but they belong to us, though. We don't want them to belong to the world. But that betrays... That's not love. That's not love of a band. I want my favorite band, I want everybody to hear them.
Agreed.
And I want everybody to love them, and I want to share it with the world.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's kind of fun to say, like, oh, I kind of knew before,
you got in on it. You feel like you're part of some exclusive club or something.
It's a fun thing. It's nothing more than just a fun thing.
But if you want your favorite band to just wallow in the obscurity of regional clubs, then you're a selfish fuck, and... there's no room for that, especially with a band as ingenious as Metallica.
Right. I mean, I think if Metallica would have finished Justice and then tried to outdo that, not in the way the Black Album did, but tried to make another thrash record, and it basically kept making thrash records. I don't know if, I mean, the Big Four wouldn't have a huge gap between 3 and then Metallica.
Yeah.
I mean, Metallica would be...
That's true.
Would maybe be playing... in Nashville Municipal Auditorium,
where Slayer plays.
Right. They played. I saw them at War Memorial, smaller than that. Anthrax on a headlining tour played Marathon Music Works.
I think you had a generous assessment of that. It's like, I don't want to be unempathetic to that feeling.
Right.
Like, okay. And I think James nailed it. This guy, let's just take the spitting guy as a template.
Spitty McGee.
Metallica represented something so personal for him, and he identified with it so personally that when it evolved past where he was, it scared him.
Of course, yeah.
I had a tour manager once that always said, "Mad people are sad people."
Yeah.
It's like he's mad and angry and wants to spit on James because he's actually really sad and confused because his identity is shaky now.
That was just because of a video. That wasn't even the record. It was a video.
Let alone, if that guy is all butthurt about the one video, which one is a thrash masterpiece, oh my God, what's he going to do when he gets to Enter Sandman and Until It Sleeps?
Oh my gosh, Until It Sleeps. For real.
Doth my hiney fall out of... Please, my buttocks fell clean off.
Distresses me to see the Until It Sleeps video.
Tightens my anus, does it, to see the Until It Sleeps video where James rubs shit on his face.
I mean, yeah. Listen, to your point, when you say, the artists you love, you want to see them succeed. You want to see the masses listen to them. You want everyone to be a part of the party,
Absolutely.
Right? Like, for instance, it's over your shoulder, but Julian Baker, this artist in Nashville that...
The Gimp?
What?
The Gimp?
The Gimp?
You have a Gimp that lives in your basement, remember, in your studio, and he stands behind me.
It's true. Don't turn around, by the way.
Okay.
No, but Julian Baker is this great artist. I've played one of her songs on a radio episode. And you were talking about it when you walked in, you're like, man, I got to get this girl's record. Like, this is a great album.
Yeah.
This is one of those artists that I'm like, I mean, she has gotten pretty popular, and I think she sold out the Ryman once.
Oh, cool.
But she does very well. But I want her personally and selfishly to be bigger, you know, and maybe be her drummer.
Yeah.
But no, I want everyone to hear that record. You know,
Absolutely.
Anytime I get excited about a record, even when Hardwired came out, Metallica's already the biggest band in the world, but I still want more people to hear it.
Dude, I was showing that record off. I played it on the bus.
Oh, hell yeah.
You know,
especially the people that kind of wrote Metallica off a long time ago. They're like, I haven't listened to anything since the Black Album. You're like, well, you missed out on a lot of good shit, but check out Hardwired because it's amazing. Like that, you want that for your friends, for your favorite bands, for the people you love, for the artists you love, and it's not like I want them to go off and get rich and famous and make a bunch of money. That's going to happen with that success, but you want other people to maybe feel something you feel when you listen to that record.
It's such it's just my normal boot up software. So like it's so alien to me to not want that.
Yeah.
That it's hard for me to really even talk about it.
I would think that Speedy McGee, we're going to call him.
Yeah.
At the Stone. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that he only connected with Metallica records just on a thrash level. Like it's heavy and fast and I could fucking bang my head to it. I don't think that guy was a very like deep cat as far as
but let's just keep it and kill them all. Then he's got a real problem with the middle part of Four Horsemen. He's got a real problem with the bridge to No Remorse. And then right with Bang On with Lightning, he's got a real problem with Fade to Black and Call of Cthulhu.
Probably Escape, yeah.
I still think Escape's thrashy.
I love
Iron
Escape.
Maiden.
I love Escape. That is not my least favorite Metallica song, not by a long shot.
All right, so now moving on. This is another interesting. We talked about this a little bit on the Rust in Peace episode. Mike Klink produced that, right?
Yeah.
And his connections to Metallica. We know that for a few weeks he was going to produce Justice.
Yeah.
Because Lars was a huge guns freak and Appetite for Destruction was just pummeling the planet.
Pummeling is the perfect.
Which I was on the planet, then I remember it.
Yeah,
I'm still, dude. Every second of Appetite is still just entrenched in me.
I wish that I still had my original cassette that I got through a friend because I couldn't go with my parents to Tower Records or wherever in California and buy it. I wish I still had the version of the cassette that my mom ripped up and I taped back together. That'd be a great piece to have.
So what we've learned through some of the deep dives into the box set is that Mike came in because Fleming was unavailable, because Fleming had just produced Master of Puppets and was probably pretty fucking busy.
Have you heard of it?
And he probably had the power to be like, sorry, Metallica, I'm not available. And then they were like, well, we'll just get Mike Klink. Mike Klink came in and just did not vibe with the band. And we've heard from Mike about it. You know, there's a blurb in the Justice book that comes in the box set where even Mike himself weighs in on it. And we know that they kept he engineered Harvester, and I think he engineered, was it Blitzkrieg and the Prince?
The Prince, and I think the Prince and Breadfan, and then he has one engineering credit on
Harvester for the drums.
Right.
So it was interesting to hear. So Steffan says, do you have any memories about starting the project with Mike Klink? How did that recording process go? And we're going to hear from the man himself, Jimmy James Hetfield, Senior, Junior, Senior, Esquire.
The second.
Right here.
Well, I recall, studio shopping, and we decided on the, one-on-one place. Loved the control room, nice and big, and that's kind of what we were used to at Sweet Silence. And big room, right there, I think in Burbank. But Fleming wasn't available. Something happened. I don't know. The timing was off, so he couldn't come in, and we wanted to get started. And I love music. I listen to music a lot. I don't know a lot of the business side, the behind, who produced that, who engineered that, who managed this. That's Lars. He investigates the players behind, and he was infatuated with Guns N' Roses, and the sound of that first record, the guitar sound, the drum, everything, it sounded very lively, very, remind me a little bit of the first Van Halen. It's a party, it's live. Lars wanted that. Lars, we always sound so sterile, and which is ironic because I'd say that And Justice for All is probably the most sterile of all records of all time.
It's amazing that
So
he said
Mike
that.
Klink was called,
Right, I know.
and he was brought in, and we tried. I remember we tried getting a guitar sound and trying to explain to him the Tent of Doom.
The Tent of Doom.
I love
It's
that.
not easy. It's like, we got to build this tent, man. The room's too big. We want it tight. You want a big drum sound in the room, but the guitar, we want it tight. You can't put it in a room. You can't close it in. It's got to breathe, but it's got to be in a tent. Here's what we did. And, showing them pictures, and it's got to be the right kind of U-Haul blanket, man. And you got to clip it together with, whatever. Duct tape and this certain clip, We tried and tried, and the Tent of Doom was never recreated very well with Mike Klink. So Mike
Klink is not someone to go camping with then, right?
not at all. No, you'd be cold and wet. Yeah. But Fleming Rasmussen, now there's something else. He can build a mean Tent of Doom.
You heard it here first, kids. Don't go camping with Mike Klink.
Yeah, you'll be cold. What do you say, soggy and cold?
Cold and wet.
I think that's interesting. I think the biggest jab thrown in that little clip is him saying, I think we learned that maybe what was cool about Appetite for Destruction might not have had anything to do with Mike Klink.
Yeah,
Wasn't that what he said? He said, let's see here. Oh, shoot. I'm trying to find it in this transcript. It's just very dense.
We talked about it being similar to the first Van Halen record, very live sounding, and then Justice for All ended up being very sterile,
Right.
and Justice being one of the most sterile records of all time.
Well, which I found interesting. I've said the same thing.
Well, I mean, I think
I've said that exact sentence. I think
by sterile, I would compare that or equate that to being one of the most dry records of all time. It's very dry. There's like
I've described it as like very like clinical. It's very like incisive, precise,
very precise,
cold. It's not a warm record.
Right.
It's sterile. It is that.
Yeah, it is, and that's not a knock on the record. That's not saying the record sucks or the production sucks or anything. Like I will always love that record, but it is. And I will always love that record. It's just a super tight, dry, very minimal effects record. I mean, there's not many parts on that record where you can even hear reverb. You can occasionally. Maybe the drum parts on Justice for All, the title track. The you can kind of hear a little bit of a room on that. The room they're recording in. But other than that, I don't think it's not even close to Appetite.
Well, he also elaborates in the transcript. He says, I would say Mike Klink was not the kind of guy who would have survived a Metallica album. He's got a different aura about him. He's really gentle, really quiet. He wasn't driving.
Okay.
We discovered that he might not have been the reason that the Guns N' Roses album sounded the way it did. He says, maybe, maybe not, but that's our perception. He says, Klink didn't come in and just say, okay, here's what we're doing. He says there was none of that. There was nothing to even fight. There wasn't a lot of energy. And I guess that was our first time trying a different producer, and it didn't work out for both of us. So be it.
Or maybe with the Guns record, it was more of a thing. Maybe I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Maybe that's Mike Klink in his role in Appetite. Maybe that's why it sounded the way it did. Because I mean, to me, Mike Klink captured what Guns sounded like live.
Well, and he was also. I mean, okay, I will take issue with James. Okay, and say I think that the job of wrangling a bunch of heroin junkies,
right,
and making probably the greatest debut rock album of all time.
Yeah.
Mike Klink had a part in that. And
for sure, yeah.
To be honest with you and all of our listeners, I prefer the Use Your Illusion records over Appetite.
Interesting. Okay.
And
okay.
like big time.
Okay.
Big time. And that's Mike Klink also.
Right.
So what is it? It wasn't just lightning in a bottle. I mean, he recreated that with the Use Your Illusion records are masterpieces.
He was kind of the Fleming of Guns N' Roses.
But I think that at the same token, though, that doesn't mean he's right for Metallica.
Of course, yeah. No, I mean, you could listen to a producer, records he did as a band and be like, wow, that sounds incredible. We got to have that guy. It sounds amazing. I love what he captured on the record. I love the aura, the vibe, whatever. And then he gets in the studio with you, and you're like, ooh, this does not work. And I feel like that's kind of what happened here.
But
with
James
Metallica.
nailed it, though, too. He's like, Lars loved Appetite because of how live it sounded.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I love the comparison to Van Halen 1.
Right.
I'd never thought of that. And when I heard that today, I thought, holy shit, James.
Oh, it makes perfect sense.
James really nailed that. Van Halen 1 is so kinetic and, ain't talking about love and eruption and.
Yeah. It's kind of like how you may have heard of him, our friend Paul Moak. It's how I know a lot of times he approaches records. He goes to see a band live, and that's what he wants to capture. He sees the energy, he feels the energy, he sees how tight they are live, and is like, that's what I want to record.
But the thing is, the heartbeat of what James is saying is Lars was responding to that in Mike Clink,
right?
And yet they made their most non-live, non-breathing. They made just he taught the Tin of Doom. They wanted it tight.
Yeah.
In fact, it was Bob Rock seeing that tour and hearing Injustice for All, where what did Bob Rock say why he wanted to work with Metallica? He said, because I saw them live in Vancouver, and I didn't feel like anyone yet had captured them live.
Right. I agree with that.
And that's what the Black Album was. Big open room. Ba 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 boom. It's just that record breathes. It's very warm. The Black Album is the beginning, obviously, of the Bob Rock era, and would absolutely culminate in Load, Reload, and Garage Inc. Disc 1 of big, warm, saturated records that breathe and have this weird smoky swagger.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of Justice.
Complete opposite.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, we would have a completely different record if they would have stuck it out with
Mike.
Maybe not completely different. I mean, I think they still would have taken the reins and been like, that's too much reverb or whatever.
I want to get your opinion on this too.
Okay.
He's sort of faulting Mike for being a little more deferential, I guess, quiet. And I guess Mike Clean didn't come in and be like, he wasn't like a Jimmy Iovine character or even a Bob Rock.
Right.
And was like,
here's what we're doing.
Fuck you guys. I don't care about your, fevered ego. I'm producing the record. This is what we're going to do. And I think Metallica at that point, because of where they were in their maturity, they were still kids. I think they liked being kicked in the balls. You know these people who they don't respect you till you kick them in the balls?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So
I don't respect you. You never kick me in the balls.
Well, the night's young, my friend.
Hey.
But the thing is, I bet they thought that the guy that produced Appetite would come in and be a ball buster. And it turns out the guy that produced the fucking, and I mean this in affectionately, but like the dirtiest, sleaziest, realest rock record in a long fucking time. This wasn't any Motley Crue bullshit.
Right.
This was Night Train and You're Crazy and Rocket Queen.
Mr. Brownstone. And
this record was just...
Well, Mike Clink was capturing exactly who they were and what they sounded like live. And he was also capturing the life they were living.
Right. That LA... That's such a seedy LA record, man.
Yes. It's... I mean,
of course, it starts with Welcome to the Jungle, which is Welcome to LA. That's what Appetite is.
It is the number one... I would say it's the number one, like, LA record ever.
Totally.
But I think maybe Mike Clink, I could be wrong here, but it'd be fun to try to get Mike Clink on the show and talk about this.
Yeah,
but
no shit.
I feel like he probably went in thinking, I want to capture them. Maybe he went to a show, I have no idea, on the Puppets tour. Who knows? Maybe he went into this record thinking, like, I'm going to capture that the way I did with Guns N' Roses. I want to capture their lifestyle and the live show and the energy and the space and the ambience of their sound in
But they wanted the tight Tin of Doom.
They wanted the opposite, so put those two together, and it's just heads butting, and I don't know if Mike Clink knew what to do at that point.
It's fascinating, right? The
Very
Mike
much
Clinks.
so.
I would like
Yeah.
to talk to Mike about it.
Mike.
Paul?
Paul, Mike.
Get Mike on the phone, Paul. Because, Paul, let's talk about Paul for a second. You've made a record with Paul. We've made records with Paul. Paul's such a unique cat because he's a very sensitive person. Mm-hmm. And he's very emotionally intuitive, I would posit.
Yes.
But I do think he does exert will. He exerts a will. Mm-hmm. And he'll fight you on shit.
Sure, of course, yeah.
He'll compromise, but also part of what you were looking for and what James may have been looking for in a producer is someone to fight you and fucking have a vision and help you achieve your vision and help you see your blind spots and help you overcome whatever kind of obstacles, insecurities, and make decisions about what songs need to get cut and what solos work and don't work. And if you got just a nice guy, nice guys aren't really fit to be producers.
Yeah, I mean, nice guys finish last, man. In the words of Billy Joe Armstrong.
Did he write that?
They have a song called Nice Guys Finish Last. That's a great record.
Well, we can move on from the Mike Clink thing. There's a little bit more here in this interview.
Green Day. Another Bay Area thrash band.
So Dan asked James, do you have any favorite songs from Justice? That's a question I would ask James.
Sure.
He says, I guess Dyer's Eve to me, that's different than any of the other faster songs we've done. He says, Damage Inc. He says, you got a fast song at the beginning, a fast song at the end, your Fight Fires, your Damages, your Blackens. It had a different arrangement, a different feel to it. Talking about Dyer's Eve.
Right.
He said, really fast, and then the chorus is kind of, and then he trails off. He says, it got more melody than any of the other faster songs. Do you think that's true?
I mean, the melodies are great in that song.
Yeah, I think so too. He says it's definitely a difficult song to play, which
is.
is nice for him to admit that.
Oh, I mean, I can attest to it, right? I mean, literally the other day I was listening to Justice and I grabbed my guitar and I was like, fuck, even that's not an easy song.
He says this, which I really liked because I've always felt this way, but he said it. The man himself said it.
Okay.
He said, I really like Harvester of Sorrow. It's a great song. It was our bells of that record.
It was, agreed.
The thick, grinding riff and bouncy drum. That's totally the bells of Justice.
Absolutely it is, yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. I like when, because, you and I doing this podcast will make those comparisons. Or when we say stuff like, when we do, Explore the Big Four, Countdown to Extinction, it's like, oh, that's kind of the Black Album of Megadeth. I like saying those things, even though, they're not trying to be the Black Album or whatever, or Harvester of Sorrow isn't trying to be Bells, but that's what it became. It is kind of the For Whom the Bell Tolls of Justice. I love those comparisons.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, human beings like to orient and situate things in familiar ways.
Right, Spit Out the Bone is the Dyer's Eve of Hardwired.
Totally. Totally it is.
It's not like making, one's better than the other. It's just what it is.
I just like that I think James hones in on Dyer's Eve. The first thing he says when you said, what's your favorite song on Justice? He says Dyer's Eve. I think that's because that's a very personal song.
Absolutely. I 100% agree.
And I've talked about this fucking endlessly, and in fact, me and Tom Quee had quite the sparring match on Thorn Within.
Thank you for the sparring match.
We went head to head on Thorn Within because I think that when James opens up, that's my...
Got to listen to that one.
Yeah, it's good.
Did he at least insert a ring bell, like ding, 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 and in this corner, Clint Wells?
He didn't. He didn't do the Guns N' Roses Get in the Ring silliness.
Get in the ring, wow.
Well, in Get in the Ring, and in this corner...
Rip Magazine, Bob Jr. and Jr. at Spin, fuck you.
Oh, dude, I could do that whole riff.
That's a freaking diss track right there.
How does it start? If you can just get me started, I can do that whole Get in the Ring riff. What, you pissed off because your dad gets more pussy than you? Fuck you. Suck my fucking dick. You be ripping off the fucking kids while they spending their hard-earned money, reading about the bands they want to know about, printing lies, starting controversy. You want to antagonize me? Antagonize me, motherfucker. Get in the ring, motherfucker, and I'll kick your bitchy little ass, punk.
I love he's talking about ripping off kids when Axl's probably canceled more shows than anybody in the world.
And they're selling a $75,000 T-shirt in Brazil.
But when that record came out, God, it was that song was so exciting.
Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 came out on the same day, and they were number 1 and 2 on the Billboard.
I know, it's amazing.
I mean, honestly, that's where Load and Reload came from. Load and Reload.
Yes,
the idea of those two sister records, same sessions, double record, but spaced a year apart because they're only spaced a year apart because of touring obligations.
Right.
That came from them touring with Guns and seeing Guns, and Lars was fucking obsessed with Guns N' Roses.
He's like, we have to do that.
Well, he said they did it, and they had 2 records that went to number 1 and number 2. Why can't we?
Yeah. And I'm sure they had 2 records that went to number 1 because of those.
So moving on to some of the last clips. So James has asked about Kirk's role. It says 2 things that we haven't touched on. Kirk's role in the record. He says, it seems like Kirk's always been great at reading what's needed from him in a situation, and that perhaps at the time that you were putting Justice together, writing it, recording it, he knew what his role was, which was to basically let you guys get on with it. He said, is that how it panned out? And before we play this clip, James says, yeah, I'd say that's kind of how that happened. He says, Kirk's been the kind of guy who really would read the room and make sense. That's kind of how I guess he is. Very good at seeing the room, seeing what's needed. He says he was really a referee between Lars and me for most of our career. He says, and now that that's changed a little bit, he's able to take the stripes off and be a part of things more. He says, but I think he did realize at that point, all right, these guys know what they're doing. I'm going to show up and I'm going to rip. I'm the ripper. And then they start talking about the one solo, and we're going to listen to a clip right now from that.
All right.
If I hear the song, I'll know that that's the solo. But I remember we were mixing, and there was some solo. He said, I don't like it. I have to change that. And we had never heard it from Kirk. It's like, whoa, what? It's like, sounds fine. No, I have to change it. And so he flew in from somewhere, did a little thing.
Probably California.
And,
probably San Francisco.
Took 10 minutes, and he flew back, and he was done. And he was happy. Kirk was happy. It's like, okay. But I remember not being very nice about it. Like, are you kidding me? What the fuck is being like? I don't like that word. I'm going to go in and redo it, you know. But there was a part of the solo where it won't, you know, it goes, and I kept thinking, I would think, because it cost $10,000 to do it, and I kept $10,000, you know. I would sing that to him every once in a while. We were dicks.
$10,000 to overdub one little part of a solo?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of how financially that makes sense. So, well, first of all, the flight to come in, probably the flights were put on the record budget.
Sure, I mean,
and then to book the time.
I mean, Kirk was either back home in San Francisco because his record was done in L.A. Was he going to Hawaii at this point? I don't know, but still, I mean, $10,000.
But wasn't Justice recorded at 101 Studios?
Yeah,
so that's in L.A. That's in Burbank.
L.A. In Burbank, yeah. So if you're home in San Francisco, that's a 40-minute flight, 45 minutes.
Right.
How did it cost $10,000? I've done Long Beach to Oakland dozens of times. And it's not that long of a flight unless maybe chartered a plane.
Well, I mean,
whatever the reason, it seems kind of crazy. It was $10,000, but
well, I'll say this: I'm glad he did it. I'm glad he fought for it because
sure.
We actually have a clip of the original solo that got. I think the second clean solo. $10,000. Now the world is gone.
Right.
Here's the original.
It's pretty close. There's only really like a couple measures that are different.
I think this original one sounds like shit. Let's hear it.
I think you're right, but I'm saying what the final one became. There's only a little part here that's different.
Let's listen.
Okay. Okay.
It was that one little part.
But, I mean, to me, that's a make or break situation.
Oh, well, also his touch and the phrasing and the pocket was really shitty on
just that, you know, when James jokes about the $10,000, $10,000. I mean, that's what we know and love, and it's catchy. It's, you know, it's something we listen to for most of our lives. And, you know, it's one of the things you lay down on a record at the time, maybe you don't think like, no, that's good enough, or it's great, or it sucks. But what he came back and overdubbed was that one little part.
Yeah,
and to me, it changed the whole thing.
Yeah, well, it's way better.
Yeah,
it was worth it.
Absolutely, it's worth $10,000.
Good on you, Kirk.
$10,000, $10,000.
So this is how the whole interview ends, and this is the nature of that, where they're like doing these So What roundtable or like deep interviews backstage at gigs. So I guess James didn't know exactly what solo that was, and Dan, who's this archivist guy, he says it was actually the second clean solo in one, and James says, "Oh, okay, there you go," and he says he has a rough mix of the original, and James says, "Huh, so the original's out there somewhere," and then this is how it ends. This is Steffan. He says, James looks intrigued, and for a moment the reality hits everyone that Dan has heard more of the collected Justice mixes and edits and roughs and bits and pieces than James Hetfield himself. And just as we were about to get into another good 30 minutes of conversation, launching from said realization, James is plucked from our grasp and ferried to the CID meet and greet. Het saved by the bell? I think that's a fair comment.
Well, what's crazy is that solo or that alternate take is on the Justice box set.
Yeah.
So at this point, do we know exactly when this interview was conducted?
This interview was conducted around. This is before the box set came out.
Okay,
this is around January.
Okay, so I'm not expecting James to listen to every minute of content of the
I doubt they
box
did.
set.
Yeah,
Lars probably did.
Probably, yes.
But James may have gotten through like a good amount, or maybe listened to like the first minute of every track. Like, okay, that's cool, whatever, I approve.
Maybe didn't even do that.
Maybe not. But it's funny that he's like, oh, does that exist? Yeah, it's coming out in your box set.
It's always interesting because we put these records on such a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
They are so important to us, and for many of us, these records saved our lives.
Yes,
and it is a bitter pill a little bit to see that the people who made it don't quite see it that way. To them, it's just another, jumping point of their career and their lives. So that's 88. That's when we made Justice. I remember on a much smaller scale, this band I love called the Damwells. Nothing really ever happened.
Are they from here?
They're Brooklyn
okay.
based.
That's right.
Great,
I know the name. Yeah.
Just a great rock band. They were playing Workplay Theater in Birmingham, where I'm from.
Played there, yeah.
And I was just a kid, just a fan, and I bought the ticket, went out to the merch booth to say hi, and they had a new record out called Bastards of the Beat, and I was talking to the guitar player Dave Chernus, who plays one of the coolest solos of all time on this one song, and I told him that, I said I'm a guitar player in town, I play in a couple of cover bands. I said, dude, you do this solo on a song called I'll Keep the Bad Things From You, but I was like, dude, that on I'll Keep the Bad Things From You, that solo you played is incredible. And he sort of looked up ponderously and went, huh, I didn't even know that song was on the record. I didn't even know it made the record.
That's different. I mean,
I was like, dude, you haven't even heard he's just a space cadet, and just to him,
that's a big difference between like Hetfield going like, oh, I didn't know that version existed of the part of Kirk solo that we didn't put on the record,
right,
compared to that's the solo on the record, and he didn't know it was on the record.
Well, all he did was he just was doing sessions, and then they were touring. They made their records often in like storage units while they were on tour, in vans and apartments, and he was just kind of like he's just an artist. He's like, I don't know what management, because he also wasn't like the front guy. I don't think he was making a lot of like sequencing decisions and
right. I don't know. It's weird, but to not know.
Oh, I thought it was weird.
A part on your record, like
you didn't even know the song was on the record.
Right. That's insane. That's insane. If someone, if there was someone that came up to me that was a fan of one of my old bands and told me like, oh, hey, I love, let's say Reliant K. And I love that song.
You would probably know what they were talking about.
Yeah, Sahara. I love that drum part you did on Sahara on this record. I would be like, oh yeah, I remember actually around that part. I remember actually I lifted that part from like I'm very detail oriented in the parts that I write and record.
Right.
And I could tell you like, oh, actually it was heavily influenced, if not lifted that part from this band and made it my own, and whatever.
Right.
But if I were ever to say, oh yeah, totally. Wait, was that song on the record? That's weird.
Yeah.
Again, no judgment, but it's somebody that's maybe so deep of an artist.
But I think my general statement applies in that the people who make the things that are so important to us,
right?
They're important to them in different ways.
Sure.
They're just on the other side of that Rubicon, and they made the thing. Mm-hmm. They're going to just see it differently.
Right.
You know, to us, the questions about the bass guitar are so. The bass issue of Justice is like probably the greatest mythological thing in Metallica's entire history.
Yeah, it's probably number one. Yeah.
And to them, it's like, I don't know, maybe it was subliminal, maybe it wasn't. Maybe Jason had to fight for the fader, or maybe we just had ear fatigue. But we're all like, it's just like The Hobbit, or it's like Lord of the Rings for us.
Still trying to find my precious.
My precious bass track.
Isn't it interesting that with Metallica, there's very few bands, I would say if any, where details about this band, like the bass issue, like the chance of Jason performing with them again, weighs heavy on all of us. There's little things that like weigh so heavy, or the fact that how many bands out in the world have had a band member pass away, and every single show they pay tribute to them, where they make their legacy live on.
I don't know if maybe AC/DC does that with Bon Scott, or Zeppelin did that with John Bonham. I don't know.
I mean, well, Zeppelin barely played any show. I mean,
Right.
they did that reunion show where Jason Bonham played, so that was their tribute, I guess. But I've never seen AC/DC
I don't know
live,
if Paul.
but-
I don't know if Paul does a thing in his show with like a thing about John. I don't know, or a thing about George. I don't know if he has a moment in his show for John and George.
But I mean, Metallica is even without their help, the fans, us, have basically like made sure that these little things are ongoing and
live on.
and we don't forget about them.
Right.
Whether it's Cliff Burton, or it's the lack of bass on Justice, or it's will Jason ever come back? Poor Rob. He's been in the band for what, 14, 15 years at this
15.
point? And people probably still wonder that.
Yeah.
Like when Jason, that interviewer, is like, oh, we're talking about something. I can't tell you what's up or whatever.
I've honestly turned the corner. I don't want Jason back. I love him. He's my guy. He's my Metallica bass player.
Sure.
But for him to come back now just makes no sense. It's like remixing Justice with bass.
Exactly.
It's over.
Right.
It's just over.
If it happens where he let's just say hypothetically he performs 2 songs with him at S&M too.
Oh, that'd be great.
It'll be a special treat.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
But I'm not sitting there getting my hopes up about it. But it's just interesting that there's a band like this that, you know, even in these questions for So What, you know, they're talking about certain things that like all of us like think about all the time.
But to them, it's just their lives.
It is, yeah.
And I would even say not only am I not getting my hopes up about Jason rejoining Metallica, I don't think I want him to.
I don't either. That's no disrespect to Jason.
Rob's
Rob's
Metallica's bass player.
Rob's the dude. He's been in the band for a long. He's the longest standing Metallica bass player. He deserves it. He deserved it from day one. He deserved it from his audition. I mean, he's a badass bass player. Nothing but respect for Rob and his abilities. But I don't know. I just, you know, all I'm trying to say is that Metallica is this special band that not a lot of artists out there can share this. They don't understand what it's like to have a fan base that don't forget about things. And they I don't know. I feel like us Metallica fans read deeper into things than a lot of artists out there.
Well, I would invite you one day to cordially join me on the Dave Matthews Band forums, because
I knew that was going to happen.
It gets really, really deep over there.
I'm sure.
They're fucking insane too. Every band's, you know, like big bands got that.
They have that kind of stuff.
But Metallica's definitely one of them. There's a lot of mythology.
Right.
Like, you know.
Well, people still to this day in 2019, almost 20 years later, still bring up Napster shit.
Well, how about
It's
we're all
crazy.
still waiting for them to play Fixer?
Well, there's that too.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's still like debuts that we're still waiting for.
Right.
You know, that I mean, like, Fixer's one of the most beloved, unplayed, ignored songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amongst the diehards. I would say the casuals would not fit
They probably
into that.
don't even own that record. Maybe
Or they just dislike it, or they don't want them to play
didn't
it or
make
whatever.
it to the end of the record.
But, you know, there's like this huge movement on the forums to get them to play Fixer at S&M 2.
Yeah.
To sort of right the decades long, you know, wrong of
Sure.
not ever playing it.
Right. I'm just a quick side note on S&M 2. My hopes are I'm placing my hopes in the bucket that is they're going to play it safe and maybe throw in an extra song or two. Only because if they come out and do some of the ones from S&M 1 and then do a bunch of ones that I haven't heard before, I'm going to be fucking stoked.
I think they're going to kill Minus Human and all the load reload stuff except for Fuel and Memory Remains.
Yeah, agreed.
And those slots are all going to be replaced with Hardwired. I think we're going to lose Of Wolf and Man.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to get at least one Saint Anger song. Probably Frantic.
I think we'll get Frantic or Saint Anger because that's what they've been playing. I think we're going to get Hardwired stuff like you said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still, my gut still says they're going to do at least Unforgiven 3 or The Day That Never Comes.
They got to do something from Death Magnetic. The Day That Never Comes is like the one I would imagine. They played Unforgiven 3.
Unforgiven 3 has strings on it on the recording.
I'd love to see My Apocalypse. But I just don't think there's a lot of room for it because they're going to do Moth. They're probably going to do Atlas or Halo.
Halo.
But here's what we're going to lose for sure.
Are they going to do Sanitarium and Fade to Black?
I doubt it.
You don't think so?
I think they're going to keep the classics that they did. Puppets and Sad and Rome and Sandman and Nothing Else Matters.
Brings me back to what I mentioned when we did our like predictive S&M2 thing. They when the announcement came out, they talked about we're going to do Michael Kamen's arrangements. We don't know what songs Michael Kamen may have arranged they didn't do.
We do know. We saw a set list. It had Fight Fire, Low Man's Lyric, Poor Twisted Me, Fade to Black.
I forgot about this.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a set list, and I think they tried them and it didn't work. I think Harvey was on there.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to do things that should not be again. I think some of the outlier tunes will go.
Right.
They're going to keep Puppets. They're going to keep Sad. They're going to keep Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, Rome, Battery.
Unforgiven.
One. Unforgiven, they didn't do the first time.
Exactly. I think they should do it again. No, not again. They should do it.
Okay.
I don't know. Now we're getting S&M2 territory heavily. But
I know. We need to get out of here.
We need to get out of here.
All right. So listen, metalupyourpodcastshow@gmail.com. What do you guys think about James' interview? I thought I learned new things about Justice that I didn't know. I love the deep dives. I love that Steffan Chirazi guy, however you say his damn name.
God bless him. He really digs deep. I love that about him.
We need to get him on the show. Any of you out there who know that guy, or know Mike Klink, or know James Hetfield,
or anybody in Metallica, past or present or future.
The next few weeks are going to be interesting because we are going on vacation. I'm going to Japan.
You leave when?
I leave this Friday.
Week? Congratulations, dude. I'm so happy for you to go to Japan. It's such a fascinating country.
We are going to have some radio episodes. We're going to have content every Monday.
There'll be content, yeah.
And then starting in September, we're going to really hunker down because my touring season slows down. We're going to get to a lot of these interviews and a lot of these guests that we have lined up. Yeah. In the meantime, go leave the review. Go check out the Patreon. We're going to be giving out shit. We got a bunch of fun shit to give away. Things just need to settle down on the home front.
That's right.
And I guess without any further ado, let's get the fuck out of here. Peace.
Let's do it. Adios.
If you were our advisor, what would you say? Then I would say delete that.